philosophical lecture shorts, and today we're going to do a quick video or a short video on dualism. And I usually write on the board as I do the video, but at the same time, because we had a lot to talk about, I went ahead and just put it up there. Now, first, the idea of dualism is a theory of the mind and body. Basically, it's the idea that the human being is both mind, an immaterial substance, and also a body, a material substance. So I have my body, here I am, and then my mind within my brain. Now remember, my brain, okay, is not my mind. It's part of the body. So they're saying there's a separation. There's a physical part, and then there's an immaterial side of us. Now the type of dualism that we're going to really deal with is most famous by Rene Descartes. We talked about it in our last video. We see when he was born and when he died. His type is substance dualism, and it's basically the same thing. Same idea. There's an immaterial substance and a material substance that makes us who we are. But he adds one thing, that the mind has priority or primacy. And what he basically means is the mind is really who we are, and the body is kind of something extra. It's a shell which we kind of use, or the mind uses, to get around the world. But really, what we really truly are is our minds. Okay? And so that's what he wants to get out there. Now the body is important. You know, we may need it so our mind can move. But in the end, what makes us who we are? It's our mind, according to Descartes. Now, what he does in his the meditations and a few other places too, is he gives us an argument for the substance dualism. And we can write it down in many different ways. I've given a Moses Toland's argument to try to kind of show what he's doing. And basically he says if substance dualism is false, okay, then the mind is not independent or separate. So what he's saying is, for substance dualism to be true, okay, we have to show that the mind is separate from the body. It's independent, okay? And that's what this argument says. So if it's false, then the mind isn't separate, okay? It isn't independent. It's the same. But then he goes, the mind is independent and separate, and therefore, according to Moses Toland's argument, substance dualism would be true. Now, I give him this case. I think he's got this right here. What he has to prove is the second premise, and that's what he spends most of his time doing. There's a couple different arguments that he does to try to prove this one. And so, grab my pen here, jump out of the screen, and I want to just highlight that this is what is the important part that Descartes wants to prove. And I said he gives a couple arguments. We'll start with one of his first ones. That is the argument from religious experience, okay, or perhaps a near-death experience, or what I'll talk about here in a second, a sublime experience. Now, if any of you have ever had a religious experience or heard about people talk about it, a lot of times maybe an event occurs where they feel some type of just connection with something else. They feel there's a deeper part of them, that they aren't necessarily just this physical body. Maybe in some case they feel a separation from their body towards something greater in this way. We really see it, though, I think right here in near-death experiences, where we see this separation between my body and mind, at least according to Descartes. And we've heard many stories about where someone's on an operating table and they felt that they're looking over their body or they're floating above it. They feel that separation, that kind of disconnect. And so Descartes saying we have an experience. We can actually experience it in actual, almost empirically, this separation of those two things. I've never had a near-death experience, but I have had what I like to call, and I think this kind of leaves the religious side and the more mystical side out of it, though it's still somewhat mystical, okay, a sublime experience. I don't know if any of you ever had it, but I've had a few of them, I feel, or at least what I title them in my life. One of the big ones I ever had was when I went to the Grand Canyon for the first time. And there's this place out there, it's a little bit outside the main area of the Grand Canyon. It's called Torway. And basically it's one of the few spots in the Grand Canyon where you can walk up to the edge and look straight down. There's no little crevasses and stuff to get down there. It's the first time I've ever seen it too. And it's a 60-mile, road, off-road driving to get out there. And it's this huge secluded place. There's me and my grandfather, and that's about it. And you walk down the half mile once you get to the campsite, and you get there, and then you stand and you look at this edge and you look over, and this just immense thing just overtook me. It was almost like a feeling of vertigo, almost like my body was stretching out and looking out, and I just had a sense kind of euphoria of this. Almost as if like looking out, over 2,000 feet straight to the ground in the Colorado River. I'm looking straight down. It was almost as if the Grand Canyon was going, jump in, jump in. Okay, I wasn't going to kill myself, but there's a sense of disconnect from where I left my body and was almost in the canyon itself. It was a pretty amazing thing. There's been some other times in my life where this happened, sometimes in playing music, doing some other things, but that's the one I always remember most. And an experience like that could also get us the feeling that we are separate. Now, there are many good counter-arguments to this. Many can say religious experience, scientists may say religious experience or near-death experience or even the sublime experience are nothing more than a chemical reaction in the brain that's making us feel this way. maybe a near-death experience when I'm dead, for those few minutes on that table. It always makes me think of the Sopranos episode where Christopher gets shot and Paulie's all worried about it, and Christopher tells him that he had a dream about how these people that they had killed a long time ago, that Paulie had killed, that be careful of 3 o'clock. And so every day after that, Paulie is freaking out that at 3 o'clock in the morning and in the afternoon, something's going to bad happen to him. And he's telling his girlfriend, he's freaking out, he's going, he was dead. Even science says he was dead. But science has good explanations for what happens there. Typically, like I say, when someone loses consciousness or their heart stops and there's no more oxygen pumping to the brain, it can cause hallucinations. The anesthesia can cause hallucinations. One of the big things is the chemical in your brain, DMT, okay, which happens actually when you die. It's a chemical that gets released to help relieve pain, and it's a very psychedelic experience. And many people who have experienced this, it would be very familiar what it would be like to experience DMT. So many times they say that, and even the case of the sublime experience, someone could say you were just having a rush of serotonin or euphoria, which could all be true. But I want to say the thing that kind of hurts it is, but the science base is saying this is too subjective to be a proof. But also the subjectivity kind of saves it. Because it's your experience, no one could ever really take it away. You could say all the chemicals and things that you want, no one can really take it away that what you experience. But a good proof doesn't just prove it to you. A good proof should prove it to everyone. It should be universal. And so, though I don't think a scientist could ever take away someone's sublime experience or whatever else they experience, I don't know if that could ever constitute a proof, universally, for there being a separation of the mind and body. So Descartes knows this. This argument is more geared towards people who would be more inclined to already believe something like this. But a better argument is what he calls the conceivability argument, and that's the one I really want to concentrate on. Now, in order to understand the conceivability argument, we have to also look at a contemporary of Descartes, a guy named Leibniz, because Descartes is going to use this idea that Leibniz kind of brought onto us. Though it's a pretty commonsensical idea, we want to give Leibniz credit, and it's called the identity law. And basically what it has to do with is we can only say that two objects, x and y, are identical to each other if and only if x and y share all properties in common, and I like to add no more or no less. What that basically means is, so we can put something, that x, let's say x equals properties A, B, and C, and y equals properties A and B. Though they share the ones in common, x has one that y doesn't, therefore they're not identical. We can say here, now x has A and B, and y has properties A and B. They are identical. They share all properties in common. What about this? Now have A and they have A and B, they're no longer identical. So to be identical, they must share all the properties in common. That is the only way we could say something is identical. If we were to find out that one thing had something that another thing did not, then we would know those two things are not the same thing. Okay? Now, what does Descartes want to use with this? Well, what he wants to try to do is to show that the mind, okay, now remember, let's remind us that we want to show the mind is independent and separate. So what he hopes to do is to show that the mind has a property that the body does not, and therefore, since they would have properties they do not share in common, the mind would be separate from the body, therefore showing the mind and body are independent of each other. Okay, that is what he wants to do. And he has a pretty decent argument, at least it seems so at first. This is a very beautiful one. I always think about it when I look at it, I'm always like, very beautiful. I don't know if it's going to work totally, but let's take a look. So here is his first premise, and there's a couple sub-conclusions as we'll see. So the first thing, and you might want to go back to my my lecture video on the representational theory of perception, where I talk about Descartes' I think, therefore I am. That is what he's going to bring up here. And so it's basically this. The first premise is a restatement of the I think, therefore I am. Okay, the cogito. I cannot conceive a body without a mind. And what he means is try to conceive that you exist without your body. Okay? I cannot conceive a body without a mind. Excuse me, let me repeat that, the second one. Yeah, let me make a mistake there, okay? I cannot conceive a body without a mind. What he says to do is try to conceive that you have a body without your mind. Try to go ahead and do it right now. See, the problem is, what Descartes wants to say is every time you try to conceive that you have a body without a mind, in order to conceive it, you have to use your mind. And so he says every moment and every which way we try to conceive that I'm just a body, no mind, no mind. In order to even do that, I have to have my mind. And so he believes that I cannot conceive, it's impossible to conceive that you have a body without a mind. Okay, we can buy that for right now, all right? See, there are some problems with that, but we'll keep it there for now. The second premise, I can conceive of a mind without a body. And now this is, once again, a repeat of the cogito, is try to do it. Try to imagine that you exist as a mind, but have no body. And it's pretty easy to do. If we look at Descartes in the Meditations 1 and 2, that's exactly what he's doing. He is denying everything that there is a body. He's saying we can doubt this and that and the other, but one thing he can never doubt is that he has a mind. Easy to conceive of a mind without a body, but impossible, according to him, to conceive of a body without a mind. Now, where is he going with this? Well, what he's trying to do is he's going to take this infer number 3, okay, the first sub-conclusion. Therefore, he claims, my mind has one property that my body does not. One property, we'll put that, there we go, that my body does not. That being, my mind is intimately tied to the idea of self. What he means is that my mind always has to be there for me to be me. If you were to take my mind away, I no longer exist. If you were to take my body away, could I still exist? Well, according to 2, yes you can. Your mind would still be intact. It has to be. Your mind is necessary for your idea of self. It has to be there for me to be me. But I can deny the body. The body doesn't need that. All right? So what he's basically saying is my mind has a property, my body doesn't. My mind is intimately tied to my idea of who I am. My mind is necessary for who I am, whereas my body is something that is not necessary. I can still be me and absent of my body, but I cannot be me absent of my mind. And so that is how we get this. And then number 4, if we bring in what we talked about earlier, Leibniz identity law, X and Y are only identical if and only if. Okay, that's a double F right there, if they share all properties in common. What we see is the mind has one property, the body does not. Therefore, they are, according to Descartes, separate. And that is how we get the 5th premise, that the mind is independent and separate. And if we were to take this and plug it in right here, we would discover that substance dualism is true. Okay? A very beautiful argument, but maybe there are some problems. We'll talk about 2 general problems and then the major one of this one. The general one is, number 1, a lot of people challenge this, okay? I cannot conceive a body without a mind, okay? That they're saying that, that maybe, you can't do it first person. Like, I cannot imagine what it would be like to be a body without a mind, but I could definitely at least conceive of my body at least like in third person. I think of like me as a robot with no mind moving around, or I take an image I see of myself in the mirror and put that in front of me and say, there's just my body walking around, yet there is no subjective or immaterial experience going on. I can imagine that, but I see in first person I cannot. So some people, say in third person you can do it, first person you can't. Does that constitute a problem? Maybe, maybe not, okay? But that's not, I think, the major one. And let's do another second one that's kind of a smaller problem too. I can conceive of a mind without a body. A lot of people say, well, what happens if you really deny all the body? How is the mind taking in sensual experience and all these things? And if you don't have an apparatus to bring in all those things, what would my mind be? My eyes, my ears, my hands, all those things, my smell, are important to make me who I am. Isn't a body necessary? Maybe, but I think you could also maybe think of maybe an immaterial sensory apparatus taking things in without a body, and that may solve it. So that's why this is another problem, but maybe it doesn't destroy the whole argument. I think the major problem to deal with this argument and what he really struggles on, and what I think why Descartes is sometimes still considered a medieval philosopher, even though he's not in the Middle Ages anymore, okay, something the medieval philosophers did a lot, has a problem with this idea of conceive, or conceivability, okay? He takes conceivability that because you can conceive it, it therefore exists, okay? Just because you can conceive something to be a certain way, Descartes seems to be saying it is that way. And I don't know if that's the case. Take this counterexample. It's called the Superman Clark Kent example. We could use anything, but that will work. Think of who Superman is. He's this guy from the planet Krypton. He can shoot laser beams out of his eye. He can breathe ice. He can fly around faster than a speeding bullet. He can fly around the opposite way of the Earth, make the Earth spin the other way so things go back in time, and so he can save Lois Lane. Clark Kent is kind of a dork. He can't talk to women. He can't talk to Lois Lane very well. Doesn't know how. He's kind of shy. Our Clark Kent, and now I can conceive Clark Kent as one thing and Superman as another, but are Clark Kent and Superman different, separate, independent things? No, they're not. They are the same person. I can conceive of one thing in 2 different ways. It never means that they actually really are different. The same thing can be said about the evening star, morning star, and Venus. There are 3 ways to conceive of the same thing, yet is it different? No, it is the exact same thing. And so what I'm trying to put here is just because I can conceive of my mind having a property that my body does not necessarily say that they are separate things. We may be talking about the same thing and just conceiving in two different ways. We may be just talking about the brain and putting it this way in one way and this way in another and trying to say they're separate when they're really not. And this is what I say is a major problem that not only Descartes does, many of the Middle Age philosophers do it all the time, that conceivability, okay, ability does not equal necessary existence. Okay, this is a famous problem in the ontological argument of Anselm and many others. He does the same thing, and it's a problem. Just because you can conceive it does not necessarily mean it exists. Sometimes it does. Right now I'm conceiving of this chair in front of my face, and it really is in front of my face. But I could also conceive that there's a pink elephant in the room does not mean that there is a pink elephant in the room. Now that seems like a very simple idea, but when you mask it in this argument, and especially when you're taking maybe back to Descartes' time, it wasn't so obvious. It's obvious now because we've seen these arguments. So in the end, it's a beautiful argument, but there is a major problem, and I think the major problem is right there. Just because you can conceive of it doesn't mean it exists. Okay? Now, to end this lecture, I want to bring up one more idea, and this is going to kind of be a segue into what we'll be talking about next week when we bring up the idea of physicalism. Physicalism is the idea that there is only the body, only a material substance. There's no such thing as a mind. And there's a really cool argument that is one of my favorite arguments to talk about. It's called the problem of interaction. So let's just, we'll throw it up here, kind of out of place, but the problem of interaction, just to give it a title. All right? So let's start out with the problem of interaction. This is a big problem for people who are dualists. So let's say this is the case. Let's say I go to hang out with my buddy to play pool tonight. There's a pool hall right next to my place where I live. So me and my buddy go there, have a few drinks, playing pool. Now let's say he's pretty good. I let him break. And what happens, he breaks, he goes over there and shoots and breaks, and he basically puts in a couple, let's say solid balls, okay? And then he proceeds to run the table on me. I don't even get a chance to shoot. And he comes down, he's been just doing awesome. He comes down now, he's got a perfect shot in the corner pocket to hit the 8-ball in, he's lining up behind the cue ball, and then he puts down his pool stick. So I'm like, what's going on? Why would you do that? And he begins to look at the cue ball and begins to do this. And I'm kind of looking like, what in the hell are you doing, man? And he turns to me and he goes, oh, I'm going to move the ball with my mind. And so I kind of stand back and look at it for a second and go, and think to myself, does he realize that telekinesis is impossible? You can't move things with your mind? And I think maybe I should tell him, or maybe I'll bring my camera out and take a video of this and show my friends how foolish he is. He can't do that. So I eventually tell him and we explain it, and he doesn't do it, and he goes and knocks the ball anyway. But what I'm trying to show you, though, is that a substance dualist, or a dualist in general, is trying to say the exact same thing. That something like telekinesis, or moving objects with your mind, material objects, is possible. And so, what do I mean by that? Well, think about this. I can't move this object chair in front of me with my mind, but think about what the dualist is saying, that somewhere in our brain, there is an immaterial thing that controls us. And at some point, this immaterial mind has to cross over into the physical part of me. Maybe it's the neurons firing, which are all physical. It has to create a boom that makes that happen, that makes my brain all of a sudden start shooting off things and I move my hand. So my mind thinks about my hand moving, and it does it. How does that immaterial mind cross over into the physical and cause it to move? It seems, even at the smallest level, a telekinesis type idea would have to be for this to occur. I mean, and it seems obvious if we're substance dualists that my mind, I think of wanting to write on the board, and I write on the board. And also we see that the physical side is connected to my mind. If I slam my hand in the door, that will send up, and eventually my mind will feel pain. There is a connection between the mind and the body. The immaterial mind, according to dualists, can move a material substance, and a material substance can move an immaterial substance. Yet, common sense seems to say that would be impossible. How does the dualist explain this gap, as they call it? Basically, there's a couple ideas. Some say, like Descartes gives his idea that God is the guarantor of that God is good, and he makes sure that what my mind and my body always match up, even though we can never really know it. I don't know. I'll let you think about that argument, if that one works. I don't know if that's really a proof. That's a more putting faith in the idea that it works. Leibniz says something that is just a mystery, and it's a mystery that will never be solved, but it's amazing and coincidental, but it happens. I kind of like that answer a little better. Doesn't give any explanation, but at least it doesn't, pretend to be anything that it's not. But there is another possible solution to this, and this is what I think is really kind of a move that's pushing us to next week. There is a possibility to get rid of this problem of the interaction that we're talking about, and that is to deny that we are immaterial at all, to deny the mind completely. There is no mind. The mind is just another way to conceive the brain, which is entirely physical. We are nothing but physical beings. And now think about the problem interaction. Is there one? No, because everything I do is a material thing moving material thing. Look, I'm moving material things. I'm moving material things. There is no problem with it. If we deny there is a mind and say we are just physical, the problem of interaction disappears. And that is what we will see physicalists are trying to say. They're saying dualism does not hold up. It makes much more sense. It is much more plausible that we are just a physical being. The explanatory power of being a physical being is far greater than being something like a dualist. All right? But that's for next week. And I got to do my little problem interaction argument, which I'm very happy about. And we will be discussing the different arguments of physicalism and looking basically at two kind of major ones, one being functionalism and the other one being the identity theory, but there'll be some others. Behaviorism we'll discuss. Really, we'll look at functionalism. But physicalism is where we're going. This was dualism. We'll look at the other half next time. I'll see you then. Thank you very much.